All right. Good morning, Doug. Today, we want to talk about reasons to be optimistic. Now, a few episodes ago, we discussed eight parasitic trends, and actually you added one, so it's 9 parasitic trends that are affecting the future. And we got a question at someone saying, well, what are some good things that are happening? And so we've been thinking about it, and we've got some ideas. But first, can you just recap for everybody what those 9 parasitic trends are?
Yeah, for sure. Just in a couple of brief minutes. First big thing is this inconsequential flu called COVID has been made into something that's changed the nature of the world. And it's going to be a jumping off point for more medically related hysterias that will increase the power of the state. Really serious. Second one, bad trend, is the huge drumbeat that's building up against the enemy element carbon, where everybody has to be carbon conscious and reduce their carbon footprint and not drive and not heat and not fly and not use energy. And of course, if you don't use energy, that brings us back to the Stone Age. It's really, really serious what these people are doing. Big trend, destroying civilization. Third thing, central banks, who after they've, gone through zero interest rates and quantitative easing, now the next thing is they're going to central bank digital currencies. You actually don't own your money at all. It's just a moving digital fantasy. This is really, really serious too. Especially for the average guy who doesn't have, a huge amount of financial sophistication, but it's happening. Fourth trend is that that government, as opposed to the central banks, have gotten out of control with their spending, where they're literally spending trillions and trillions of dollars. And they've always been profligate and idiotic. But now, they've gone big time, and all these trillions are being directed to what they think are the right places, which are exactly the places that we think are the wrong places and the wrong people, because it's all going to the wrong people. So government spending, and government generally. The fifth thing is the spread of wokeism as a new religion. Now, Christianity's got its problems, but that doesn't mean it should be replaced wholesale by wokeism, which is about the most, wokeism it's a religious philosophy. That's what it is. And it's basically overcoming previous religions. And it has to do with all kinds of things, ESG, environmental governments, I forget what the S is, and DIE, diversity, inclusion, equity. This is all part of wokeism, viewing people as being either Black or white or of color, or all this, the sexist things we've got. It's a whole panoply of things. It's completely insane. And when you collapse the traditional moral values of a society, you're going to collapse the society. And the sixth thing, and these things are on the way. These things, first 5 things are all here and now apparent. But digital IDs, where it's going to be pretty, digital IDs, which you'll need to go from one part of town to another, as they try to put that Oxford thing where you can't go more than 15 minutes from your home and all this type of thing. The next move is to chip everybody, which will make it easier and more convenient. And I think the masses will go along with it. And the 7th thing is the security apparatus of the state has turned inward, where it used to be we had a foreign enemy. Oh, got to fight those Nazis, got to fight those Russian communists, got to fight those Chi-Coms, got to fight, Saddam. who's going to take over the world. And it's really not that way anymore. So with the militarization of the police that started in the 80s and the institutionalization of SWAT teams everywhere and see something, say something. I mean, the state has redirected its attention inward, which is more dangerous than a foreign enemy, actually. Eighth is, I think, that it hasn't evidenced itself fully in the US, but I promise we're going to see this in the next couple of years. It's something that resembles the Chinese social credit system, where your social credit score is dinged for having the wrong attitudes, the wrong connections, the wrong whatever. And we're going to get that. It seems to be working for these people in China, I think. And they'll try it here. And the ninth thing, which somebody brought up in a Zoom call the other day, and completely obvious, but we shouldn't have left this out, is the great replacement through mass migration. So, it's wonderful if you get a few people from this part of the world and that part of the world and the other part of the world. They bring in interesting customs and restaurants and stuff like that. Very nice. But when there's a wholesale population replacement, what it basically means, since this is only happening in the West, there's no mass migration into China. That's not going to happen. There's no mass migration into Saudi Arabia or any African country or India. That's not happening. It's all people from these backward places in the world that are migrating to Western countries with the seats of Western civilization. And it's like, I often make a joke. Hey, there's nothing wrong with Canada that 40 million Nigerian migrants can't cure. And that's exactly what's going to happen to Canada and most of the countries in Europe and everywhere. And if you think that Nigeria is a nice place, it's a shithole. It's a crappy place with people that have bad habits and a low standard of living. And I applaud the Nigerians that want to move to Canada to improve themselves. That's different than mass migration and inundation. Anyway, those are the 9 things, okay? And I said before that it's not just as if a couple of these things are happening around the fringes. This is like, it's become a battleground where it's almost like an orchestrated assault by some conspiracy. Well, probably the WEF people that all share the same views and have a lot of power and are back of all of these things. It's like we're not just under assault where, the Americans are going to send a B-52 strike with saturation bombing. No, after they're through with that, they send in the second thing, which is a wave of F-16s for point targets. And then you got a frontal assault of infantry and followed up by battalions of tanks that are going to do that. And in the meantime, number 5, they got snipers out there taking out high profile individuals. And they'll probably wrap it all up with a biological war attack. So when you've got a powerful enemy that's using, and lots more things, that are assaulting you on numerous fronts with many different weapons, you're basically fucked. So that's my argument, okay? And anyway, there's a Zoom call that you and I are on. I'm always on it. You're sometimes on it, but you're missing something, I think. And there's a bunch of smart guys there. And one of them is Foster Gamble, who's well known because he's the producer of those Thrive movies, okay? And Foster is a really nice and smart guy and an incurable optimist. I am too, believe it or not.
More obvious with him, though, I have to say. It's more obvious.
Yeah, I think Foster takes it just a little bit too far. his optimism. So he came up, we have this weekly Zoom call, and it was causes for optimism because I gave a presentation last week to the people on this Zoom where I amplified these 9 trends that I've just summarized briefly. And so Foster basically, and a couple of other guys joined him, said, well, yeah, but it's not that bad. And you and I have been asking ourselves, maybe we're overboard here. I mean, with the gloom and doom. I mean, there's good things happening, okay?
Yeah, and not because those 9 things aren't true. Those are totally true. But there are counter trends, and maybe, we're not giving them enough weight. I think that's our position, right?
Yeah, and basically what Foster brought up, and Paul Rosenberg is another guy that likes to emphasize this. He has a publication called
Free Man's Perspective.
Yeah, we can link to both that and Thrive, actually. And Paul picked up that ball and he said, well, yeah, but this is like you have a pile of cow dung, and after a while, what do you know? There's little plants, there's little flowers that start arising in it and so forth. So nothing is forever. And that's totally true. I can't argue with that. But the problem is, I think we're confronting such a gigantic pile of cow dung that despite the fact there are lots of little things that are happening around us, like the collapse of the schooling system with horrible teachers saying horrible things and, corrupting young minds. It was Saint Ignatius Loyola that said, give me a child until he's 7 and I control him for the rest of his life, or something type of thing you expect a Jesuit to say. And Lenin said the same thing, exactly the same thing. And they're right to a great degree. But at the same time, the statistics are that lots of parents, even by government statistics, are withdrawing their kids from schools and homeschooling. And so, there are these counter trends out there. And, hopefully all these universities that are totally corrupted, totally captured by administrators and wokesters, it's horrible. They're slime pits of corruption, all of the major universities. Well, people withdraw from them. And of course, you and I are working on this book that I've been threatening to write for years, called The Renaissance Man, which is exactly what should you do from the time that you're old enough to think about these things up until, you're at least in your 30s or 40s even, to be, do, and have all the things that you want in the world that have nothing to do with these horrible people that control everything, it seems like. So,
I think
anyway.
It's hard to put like that in a nutshell to me, that big trend that is positive is that because of the last couple of years, the failure of these institutions and of professions has become really, really obvious to a portion of the population. And so this is, parents seeing how bad the schools are, how they're not just suboptimal, but they're actually damaging, they're really destroying kids' minds, with a mix of like 1984 kind of managing the language, confusing them about what a boy and a girl is, all the way to turning them almost into a version of Mao's Little Red Guard. I mean, turning them against their parents, isolating them from them, so that they're actually destructive. So like that, and then obviously the healthcare industry, faith has been lost by a certain percentage of the population toward them. That's healthy, I think. So there's some healthy skepticism that was not part of things before. And so everyone was kind of voluntarily just going along and supporting systems that were actually feeding on them. And I think that realization, I think, is one huge positive trend for sure.
Yeah. no, there's no question about it. There are these good trends that are arising, little flowers that are poking their heads up from the dung pile, no question about it. Another thing that Foster brought up, which was worthwhile, is that we humans, we tend to observe cause and effect. Well, most people are not very good at it, but you figure these things out. You stick your hand in a fire, you get burned. Some people are slow learners, but so really stupid things, eventually it'll start dawning on more people. Okay, I buy that. Cause for long-term optimism. And he pointed out that we're creatures of conscience. In other words, people are basically wired for all kinds of reasons, I guess we could discuss. They're wired to do the right thing. What's the right thing? Well, the right thing is something, doesn't hurt other people, that, creates things that make the world better. We are creatures of conscience. Everybody says they want to do the right thing. It's good.
But the way that gets inverted, though, is that they change the definition of what good is, and that's where that's the part that I think has caused things to be so messed up now. So I think people always want to do what is defined as good or what is defined as right, but you can see the libs of TikTok, which is this TikTok channel where they expose these mostly teachers who are doing these videos about themselves, the way they basically are grooming kids. Okay. And they're openly talking about how they're talking to them about their pronouns and sexuality when like little kids. So those people are, to them, I think that they think they're doing good. I don't think that they think they're doing evil.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because the Nazis and the communists and the Soviets, the Maoists, they were all convinced that they were doing good. They're doing the right thing. It's quite a problem, and it gives you a real sense of cognitive dissonance, where people that don't think this out critically, it's they're kind of lost. Is that right? Is that they're mutually exclusive? Yeah, it creates chaos, intellectual chaos, and other types of chaos. And then Foster pointed out, well, we have free will. Yeah, that's true, but all these 9 things and more subvert free will and bury it and make it very hard to get out because of fear. Because we all have fear. Yeah, we have free will, but we also have fear, So, and then, I guess Foster's general argument was, the general reality field wants us to align with things that are good and productive. Okay, I buy that. I don't think we live in a malevolent universe. I mean, things generally, like a Zen master would say, it's the watercourse way, where everything seeks its own level eventually. It's just the nature of reality. It's like you can't hold your breath forever doing stupid things. Eventually, reality will make you line. Okay.
Yeah.
So I buy all that. And, so what gives Foster all this confidence? He gave a very nice presentation, I thought. But basically said it was his personal experience. And he quoted Martin Luther King. I'd never heard this quote of King before. But he said the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Yeah, that's the way I see it too. So if you believe that, you got to be optimistic, regardless of these 9 trends and some others that we're forgetting about. Because as I pointed out in the past, hey, look, the Soviet Union, really bad idea. But it only lasted 70 years before it collapsed of its own weight. We didn't have to fight it. Just, let it destroy itself. The same thing happened with Mao's China, which was even worse. These things all destroy themselves. So that's real cause for optimism.
Yeah.
But, you know, the point, you know, and since, you know, I was on the Zoom call where we were talking about good things that are happening, you know, Foster's he's an Aikido instructor. And so he doesn't believe in fighting things directly the way a karate guy would, but simply redirecting the force elsewhere where it falls in upon itself. So yeah, I think yeah that makes a lot of sense.
I agree with that
Um,
100%. One of the things about if you challenge it, if you fight it, you will definitely be crushed by it, or you end up in, you end up a January 6th person and you end up in jail for a long time. So I don't think that works, but I do think the whole Aikido thing is like using people's energy against them. And one of the things that you see is that because of what's happened in the last couple of years, because of these trends, these bad trends, you see people losing faith in the institutions that are driving those trends, which we already talked about. So that is one of those, like, that energy then that like loss of faith, but still want to seek a solution out, is drives people to do something. I know you mentioned, Foster talked about, was, you know, building alternative systems, which he says are emerging everywhere. And I think it's a reaction to, but not against, some of those bad trends. So people are doing all kinds of new things to basically get out of it.
yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. As a cartoon that I saw years ago, where there's a kid watching a show on television, and you know, a big bully comes up and puts himself in between him and the show, so the little kid can't watch what he wanted to. So instead of getting into a fight with the big bully, he says, okay, forget about it. And the little kid gets a great big chair along with some popcorn and Coke and sits above the kid. So they both kind of get what they want. But so that's, yeah, I agree with, in the long run, the good guys are going to win. But the problem is that maybe with all these 9 things, launching a multi-pronged assault on civilization itself, maybe we're going to go into something that resembles the Dark Ages. And there were 2 Dark Ages that we know of. One after the collapse of Rome. You know, it took a long time, but it happened and lasted from, let's say, the year 400 to the year 600 or 700, something like that. And then there was the Bronze Age collapse before that, around 1300 BC. Same thing happened where, you know, systems for the technology available and the population in existence, and God knows what comes together, and everything just falls apart and collapses. And it recovers and goes to new highs, as both of those gigantic collapses did in the past. But, you know, there's a chance that we're going to find some way to really fuck things up this time. Notwithstanding all these I totally agree with these things. But
let me mention a couple of very specific things that I've noticed. And these are, I don't have a lot of data behind it, but some things that when I was trying to come up with a list for this, one that I think is good, and is that a lot of the frauds, the pretenders, the corruption, the grifter, I feel like that is going to be washed out. You know, I mean, in an economic, if there's a, you know, financial market problem or the, you know, an economic reckoning that seems like it has to happen, like at least some of the dishonest, the obvious fraud, scam way that, you know, so many things are built, I think that gets washed out. And I think that's a really, really huge positive, because if you eliminate all of that, the productivity that can come back into the world, you know, becomes very interesting. So I think that's one thing that I think is a positive thing. I mean, we see it with all the frauds that are coming out lately. I mean, whether it be some of the crypto frauds, you know, or other things, you know, on social media, there's some of those too, we see. So all those things, those frauds getting washed out, I think is really, really positive. Do you agree with that?
yeah, I do. lot of positive things could happen. I mean, maybe central banks will collapse and the world will go back to sound money. It's
Well, you see,
possible.
like the Swiss central bank that, lost $186 billion. That was, I think that was 186 billion. Pretty sure that's the number that now is being, put on the taxpayers to essentially, to prop up the bank. So you got to wonder how long is that sustainable where these central banks are actually losing money and, now having to go to taxpayers to essentially, refund themselves. It kind of puts that whole central bank thing up for, question for the first time in my lifetime.
Yeah, that is an amazing story because the central bank of Switzerland was actually like a hedge fund. I mean, their assets they were buying all kinds of tech stocks, all kinds of crap. And they looked like geniuses for a while, but now not so much. So this is helping perhaps to discredit the whole idea.
Yeah.
But maybe not, because maybe the average guy doesn't know how to, this is, oh yeah, this current crop of congressmen, they're all fools and frauds. We need to throw the bums out and replace them with good guys who are exactly the old bosses, new bosses exactly like I don't know.
That's the biggest risk, I think, to any positive trend is that it gets, people's disenfranchisement essentially gets sort of co-opted behind some new leader or some solution, so that someone's going to bail people out and that they don't have to do it for themselves. I think that's the biggest risk to it.
Yeah, it actually, I wonder if the rise of mass charities and mass NGOs shouldn't be added into this as like a 10th trend, quite frankly, because rich people that create a lot of wealth, and then they say, God, I've got millions of dollars here, I'm going to die. Maybe they don't have kids to give it to, okay. Or maybe if they have kids to give it to, they haven't trained the kids properly with what do you do with all this money, and they realize it, and they don't want to destroy their kids' lives, which it would do. So what do? They give it to some idiotic NGO or charity or something like that. And
That's a great, I love it as a number 10 because you have the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You can add as a proof of the trends in mention.
So all this capital productive is given to the evil people. So you got to mention that as number 10. You're right.
I think so.
There's more of these things that as we peel
Doug,
back.
This is the positive trend episode. Come on, we gotta.
Yeah.
Okay, I have one.
Yeah.
It's and this is again anecdotal, is that I know of 8 people who have had a baby in the last year or are going to give birth within the next 60 days. And I don't remember another time in my life where I knew that many people that were having babies. And this, a lot of times I assumed that was because of my age. I was kind of seasoned out of that. And that was in an age before where people were. But no, the oldest one that I know of is 50 and the youngest one I know of is 27. So so for one person, it's their 5th kid. For a few of them, it's their 1st. But I think that's it. They are acting optimistically about the future. I think having kids is about the most optimistic thing you can do for the future. And so that's new, I think. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, it could be this counter trend. It could be that's a counter trend to the well-known demographic collapse of many societies around the world. So, yeah.
I mean, the biggest complaint I've had is about is that good people aren't having enough kids, is what I've been thinking. Plenty of people, maybe you prefer not to have as many kids, have kids. And so, but I always wanted good people to have kids, and seeing this many of people I know who I think are these, I'm biased, obviously, I think there's great people, is I think a huge new and interesting trend.
Yeah. Well, personally, in my own world, I only know one couple that are having a kid now. Maybe there's others out there. But
There
that
probably,
is interesting what you're saying.
yeah,
I mean, it could be this is one of these little flowers that's, you know,
I think so.
blooming
I think,
before our eyes. We hardly notice it.
yeah, I think this is a big one. I really do. I think there's something to it. I also think when you're talking about Foster saying that, you know, we learn from cause and effect. And I think that I also kind of believe that things tend to move in a pendulum. You know, they go way too far one way and then they come back another way, like markets do. And so this trend, I think, around, you know, where masculinity specifically was, you know, seen as, well, toxic, you know, got to that point, but where it's bad in every way. And where, you know, the women thought that, and men started to believe that, certainly themselves, producing soy boys and, you know, all kinds of shameful things. I think that trend has reversed. I think we saw the nadir of it already, and it is already moving back in the other direction. And I think that portends very well for the future.
Well, you know, I've just recently discovered the existence of this guy named Andrew Tate.
Yeah.
And he would seem to be
Yeah.
an indication of that. And he said, so I listened to some of his stuff, and he says a lot of the right things, seems to have some right attitudes, but he's just such an asshole. I mean,
Not only
really.
that, he literally, he's actually, I mean, all of his fortune has been made by conning people, whether it be conning women to do sex work for him, or conning people on selling a Forex program where everyone lost their money, where he copied the content from another Forex program, you know, to his current BizOp one. So he's conning his young male fans. But I still think the good thing that he did that I think was good, and I think it was just, he's kind of like the symbol of this that we see, is that striving, ambitious, strong, masculine men, like they're just, one of those was never even allowed to rise to the you know, collective consciousness before. And it is now, because I think that trend has turned, because now it's what people want.
But is it true? I've heard these things, I've read articles about it, that the sperm count of men in the Western world is collapsing, sound 50% or something like that. And they attribute that, well, you know, who knows what the reason is. Is it an overabundance of processed foods? Is it the fact that, you know, nobody gets any exercise because they're always watching their machines all the time? Is it because so many kids and young people, all kinds of people, are on psychoactive drugs? I'm not talking about pot and LSD. I'm talking about Xanax and Zoloft and Prozac, and there's well over 100 of these things. Maybe that's I don't know what the real cause for it is. Maybe it's a composite of these things. So maybe, although I think what you're saying is right, and people like Andrew Tate are, you know, kind of the pendulum swinging the other way, but
yeah, well, here's the thing though. I think that if you, it makes sense that if you live in a world where masculinity is considered evil, that testosterone would recede. Like, wouldn't it just, I mean, to me, that seems just in some way. Like, if you believed it was bad, things would be done to suppress it, you know, like you would, and people would do it to themselves by adopting a lifestyle that was less masculine, you know, or so I suspect that if it's seen as a good and it's pursued as a good again, that those numbers will turn around. Maybe because people make better decisions, maybe better food, maybe removing, you know, some plastic estrogen supporting things from the environment. I don't know, but I think that if masculinity is considered good again, then I think that that problem could be solved.
maybe. Yeah, listen, entirely possible. I hope we're not just grasping at straws.
Sounds
Because
like it.
the powers that be that are launching these assaults on many fronts are I think they're picking up the pace, even while these little flowers are growing in the cow pies in the meantime. Well, listen, it's good to be hopeful. I mean, we don't want to be hopeless. I mean, that's not a
No,
good
it's not
attitude to adopt.
Yeah, well, yeah, it makes you weak. I mean, being hopeless basically makes you want to crawl in a hole and die, which I think if there's any,
Yeah.
if there's a grand conspiracy, it's to get you to give up. first and
Yeah.
foremost, to make you realize, oh, it's not even worth the fight. You don't stand a chance anyway. So just get with the program.
No, you're absolutely right. That guarantees that you're going to lose a battle. I mean, apathy is like the last stage before death itself, I think. So
So
no, you can't be apathetic about these things, which is, of course, why we do the things that we do, just because, well, it's good karma. And also you've got to fight against what you think is evil, notwithstanding the fact that the Aikido method is in the long run better.
well, and we're not, and I think that's what we're doing, because basically under the pressure of that, we're talking about, we're pointing it out, we're doing that. And then we're talking about today, a few solutions or a few positive trends, I think, that are moving in the right direction. So
Yeah, I mean, it's well known. I'm not a Christian, but I love many of the sayings of the man Jesus, who is called the Christ. And one of them, he says, let those who have ears hear, let those who have eyes see. That's all you can do, is point these things out. And then maybe say, oh, I never thought of it that way.
exactly. I think we're doing it. So I also think that just one other, I think that we can, maybe it's a psychological issue, but like you see these 9 or now 10 parasitic trends that are real, they are affecting the world, but it almost, how much, if you were disconnected from technology, when would you figure it out that this stuff was even happening? Like how much of it's actually happening in actual reality, and how much of it are we just kind of going along with and kind of self-creating in a way? I mean, if you were disconnected, if you didn't have the internet, would you even know?
Yeah, you're right. If we didn't have all this electronic stuff around us, we would basically be looking at things in our little neighborhood. We'd be looking at real stuff. I mean, animals and plants and material things, and you wouldn't be thinking about all these, and these other people wouldn't have the power to impinge on your thought universe. Well, it's part of what we were talking about before. This is one of the reasons why I have a love-hate relationship with my computer. I love the things that it brings me and allows, but I hate all the things, all the baggage it brings with. And the fact that everybody relates much more to their device these days than they do to anything else. That's another negative trend, I guess, isn't it?
Agree. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's a technology trend. Is that technology can be used for useful things too. So I don't know if I would necessarily say it's a negative, but
yeah, no, I'm a technophile, so I think it'll be a happy ending in the long run.
But I think
there's no guarantees about anything, good or bad, actually.
There isn't, but I just think what I've been trying to do, I've been consciously attempting to do for the last year, is to actually focus on my non-mediated reality, like the reality that I do not encounter through a screen, and put my energy there instead. And it actually has made me far more hopeful than I have been in the prior 3 years, for sure. I mean, because I just feel like, I almost feel like those 9 or now 10 trends will, a lot of because of the way I position myself, but I think it'll just happen. And I think that, there will be like a bifurcation, there was be, or a subspeciation or something that'll actually, you live in parallel realities and be fine. You have to kind of give up some things, but I think it's totally worth it and wholesome and good.
I like that term, non-mediated reality. It's pretty good. And it just reminded me, though, that, one of the very few laws that I believe in is the second law of thermodynamics, which basically says that everything falls apart unless there's an outside input of energy to keep it going. And problem is that a lot of people aren't working anymore. They're actually trying to close down inputs of energy, period, in society itself. So unless you actively progress to make things better, things will naturally fall apart, because that's just the way the universe is structured.
Yep. Well, I think collapse, whatever that means, is inevitable. But that doesn't have to matter. I don't think it has to matter to you too much. I mean, it'd be inconvenient and unpleasant in many ways, but I actually think you can, again, create this different reality.
Well, and anyway, we're talking about collapse, and these things happen on a grand time scale. I'm 75 years old. Why should I give a fuck if things collapse 10 years from now, frankly? Really, we have to keep these things in perspective. I guess it's just, kind of intellectual stimulation, thinking about stuff like this.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it can really, you could find yourself getting really, really caught up into it if you're, especially if you're not aware of it. I mean, if you look at all, you mentioned several places, you mentioned like Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia and Mao's China, that if you were in those places and unaware at certain times, like you would have found yourself in pretty dire straits. So being aware and understanding the trends, and then like taking action in your non-mediated reality to like avoid those those thrusts, and instead use their energy in some way to create something different, I think then you end up better off. So it's worth doing to keep on to make sure you're not running afoul or directly into some of these negative trends, but it doesn't mean that they are what will dictate your life, I don't think.
Well, that's absolutely correct. But on the other hand, if you were born into one of those societies, trapped in them, and you wanted to survive in the here and now, the smart thing would be to act like a Nazi or a communist or a Maoist, because if you weren't, they'd kill you. So people tend to go with the trend. They tend to run with the herd. It's a survival instinct.
That's true. That's true. Well,
maybe what we're doing here is by trying to cast out these thought bombs. I hope that they don't blow up in the faces of people that put them into, because you could live a quiet, peaceable, gradually degrading life. But at least you're not going to wind up in Guantanamo if you don't think these thoughts. So it's dangerous to think these thoughts. Necessary if things are going to get better, but it's dangerous to think them because you can get washed away by the mob thinking these thoughts.
That's true. That's true. But my guess is the people who can assent to these thoughts probably don't have a choice. I mean, I think it takes a special person. I don't think everyone is capable of denying their reality, of looking at it and going, no, I'm going to, or denying their conscious, or denying their, the things that matter to them, especially to pretend that a lie is truth. I think that's hard to do.
Hard to do. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. Everybody loves Popeye the Sailor Man and his catchphrase, I am what I am. And that's all what I am. So Popeye was always true to himself, I think. Not a great intellectual or anything, but
Still some role model characteristics there we can use.
Yeah, and I think we ought to put forward positive role models. And positive role models are not the kind of degraded beings that populate the Biden administration today, or most world governments for that matter.
Yeah, or most media, most social media, like Andrew Tate. I don't think he's a positive influence, although he's a reflection of a change in the zeitgeist, I think, which is good. I think that's good. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's a skilled hustler that takes a good idea and runs off into a wrong direction with it.
Ends up in a Romanian jail. So that's where he is now. All right. Well, we'll leave it there, Doug. I think we got some positive things, maybe to offset most of the negative ones. And we'll see if you guys have comments. We'd love to hear what you think about these countervailing trends, these positive things. And if you have something we've missed on the negative major trend or on the positive, let us know in the comments. I'd like to see it.
Yeah, I'm sure the list of negative can go a lot more than 10. And hopefully the list of positive can be much more specific. I mean, Foster's thinking is good, but it's not, it's pretty loosey-goosey too.
I think the having kids thing is, I think that's a good one. I think that's
That's,
very,
that's a plus. And presumably these people that they're having kids today are hip enough to keep their kids from being actively corrupted.
yeah, these are the ones who want to have kids. Yep, absolutely. All right, Doug, leave it there for now. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Good, thanks, Matt.